Hello, welcome back to Elden Ring. This is part 2 of our intelligence run through the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. Last time, we started out right in the Moog boss room, and we made our way basically just through the open world, hitting a few notable areas, meeting most of the NPCs that we will be making our way through this land with. And when it comes to specific items, we got our hands on the Black Steel Great Hammer, a hefty cracked pot, the Great Sword and Armor set of Solitude, the Backhand Blade, a new weapon class. We got the Outer God Heirloom, the ability to craft hefty lightning pots, the Blessed Blue Dew Talisman, which sadly was nerfed, but still useful enough, I suppose. We got the Oathseeker Knight set, the Pata, the Ash of War Savage Lion's Claw, the ability to craft hefty furnace pots, the Serpent Crush Shield, another new weapon class in the Great Katana. We got another new weapon class in the Fire Spark Perfume Bottle. We got the ability to craft fire coils. We got the Spelldrake Talisman +3. We got the Swift Spear, another perfume bottle, this time with deadly poison. We also got an Ancient Dragon Smithing Stone. This time we're starting out at Castle Front, and we are heading southeast. And we went this way before, but last time we went to the left. This time we are going off to the right, because there's a path downwards. And there's some goodies here. Don't worry about the enemies. They're really not difficult. Off to the right here, yoink, and get the spread crossbow. This is mostly useful against really big enemies, like trolls, or these guys if you want to use a crossbow against them. But it does have the problem of it shoots multiple... Yeah, capable of loading multiple bolts and firing them simultaneously. Which is good for damage, but not good for ammo. Like, that thing just eats ammo like crazy. And as you can see, there's more of them. Yeah, so they like to fight. And for the most part, you can just ignore them, leave them to it. And you can just continue on your way. I'm gonna deal with the caves and places like this later on. For now, we're going to continue through the open world. And we can take out this group before we look at it. So, the Blessed Blue Dew Talisman used to give you 1 FP per second. As you can see, now it takes 2 seconds to give you a single FP back. And I'm a big advocate for passive regen stuff, so I'm really not a fan of that nerf. I can kind of understand it if they went people in PvP are using it to draw out fights and have basically infinite FP. If it was a thing like that, I could understand it. But in that case, I think it would have been better to have it stay at 1 FP per second, but then lower it to 0.5 FP per second, how it is currently. Like during multiplayer or during PvP. And I would rather go with just during PvP, because I can see that being an issue. Because I have a friend that likes to do a lot of co-op. They like to help people a lot. And a large part of that is PvP. And something they would do a lot is just sit back and they would intentionally not partake in the fight. You can use this to jump up into SotE Altis, which is the next region. So how the base game is sectioned off. How the base game is sectioned off into like Limgrave, Caelid, Liurnia, Altis Plateau. It's pretty similar to that. In the DLC, think of where we're at now as Limgrave, and then this area up here would be like Altis Plateau, and then down here there's a red area and a blue area that are kind of stacked on top of each other, and they're basically the same place on the map, but they act as two very different regions. And so this jump right here would take you from basically Limgrave into Altis Plateau. But you can also get there through going through Castle Ensis, which is how you're supposed to do it. But anyways, back to what I was saying before. I have a friend who likes to do a lot of co-op, and a large part of that is PvP. And something that they would do is intentionally not fight invaders. And invaders at first would be very happy about that, because instead of being in a 1v2, well, now they're just in a 1v1. And so the invader would really not want to attack my friend. Rude. They would really want to go out of their way to not attack my friend, so that way they could stay in the 1v1. But something my friend would do is they would use Blessed Blue for that passive FP regeneration, and they would just pop healing spells. They'd pop Golden Vow and Erdtree Heal. Revered Spirit Ash, that is here on the map, going down into this ravine place. But they would do that, pop heals and buffs, so that way the host wouldn't die. And it would make things so much more difficult for the invaders. And the few times I got to see it, it was very, very funny. Watching, because you could tell by the body language of the invaders that they would get increasingly frustrated that they couldn't, like, they would try to kill the host, but then my friend would just have like 80 faith and pop Erdtree Heal, and then boom, host goes back up to full health. And they couldn't do anything about that unless they attacked my friend. But But then that would be putting themselves in a 1v2. And they didn't want to put themselves in a 1v2. And so it was a rock and a hard place situation for the invaders. And it was always entertaining to watch. But with Blessed Blue getting nerfed, they can't do that nearly as effectively. And they have to start popping flasks now, which they didn't have to do before. Which is highly unfortunate. I rolled too early. But yeah, so I can see the host wanting to get rid of that for PvP. But the nerf being in general, not a fan of. Because the way I see it, talismans are supposed to be pretty powerful. I rolled too late. I rolled too late. So please. I'm just trying to kill you. There you go. Horned Baron isn't that good, so you can honestly just ignore them and you'll be fine. But I enjoy fighting those things. So that's what we're doing. But yeah, I do wish that they made it PvP only. And there is precedence for that. Because there are a lot of things where they go, this does 15% in PvE, but 7.5% in PvP. And so, having it be another one of those situations, where it's 1 FP per second in, like, when there's no invader, but 0.5 FP per second when there is an invader, I think that'd be good for keeping it strong while still nerfing it for PvP. Also, two-headed turtle talisman. It's like the turtle talisman from the base game, but even more stamina recovery now. So, very good. I probably should get a bow for that, but oh well. Now that gets you mushrooms and red flesh mushrooms. And then there's a cave here. And I'll get the grace just to get the grace, but this cave, it's not bad, but it's not worth it, in my opinion. It's very much just a normal cave. It's just more Elden Ring. Like, there's some wolves. There's some of the enemies that were in front of the Ruined Forge, the, like, Blood Fiend guys. And then that's it. Like, there's nothing special about this cave, so if you want to see everything, go for it, but it's not good enough to justify going through, in my opinion. But for now, I think we'll go through Castle Ensis first. I don't know why, but I always put Bellerod off. I'm not going to put it off nearly as much on this character, but I want to put it off a little bit. Yeah, I'll go with intelligence. And yeah, I started this character, like going into the DLC, started them off at level 150. The next character with the Faith Run, because the Faith Run is next. They are not level 150. Though the level doesn't matter too much. Oh, he is freaking out. I don't know what he is up to. Or what he's on. But it was not good. Magic is so good in this game. Like, both sorceries and incantations. I mean, they can get kind of destroyed by animation readers. But if an enemy doesn't have animation readers, magic is just too good. It's kind of unfair. Also shields. Shields aren't as big of a deal, but they can still make things a bit more difficult. Also, if you don't like the sacrificial axe, but you still want that FP regen from getting kills, the Dung Eater, when they invade you outside of, like, in the capital outskirts, he drops the Sword of Milos. And that gives, I believe, 5 FP per kill, whereas Sacrificial Axe gives 4. So that's a great sword, which great swords are very good. Best weapon class, in my opinion. Because they are very, very versatile. And so it's a great sword, and it gives 1 more FP. So you can run with that if you want. And it works very nicely. It didn't let me lock onto this guy. That felt a bit rude, in my opinion. But it's okay. Because we can just shoot the moon. And yeah, I wasn't joking. Magic in Elden Ring is kind of crazy. It is so powerful. And there's so much variety. Like in the other Souls games, it's basically just Soul Arrow, which in this game would be Great Glintstone Shard. And it's like you have that, or you have that but bigger, or you have that but even bigger, or you have that but even bigger. And that's it. Like, obviously there's a bit more than that. There's also like homing soul mass. But there's not a whole lot of variety. Whereas in Elden Ring, plenty of variety. Though, as you can see, I only have 3 spells. And that's because I'm someone who doesn't like to have a lot of things on here, because if you watch some other people play, not to hate on other people, that is not what I'm doing, but some people will have like the heal, and then they'll have maybe a blue heal, and then they'll have like this, then they'll have the whistle, and then they'll have like boluses, they'll have this, they'll have like 8 items on their quick item slot, and then they'll need to heal because they'll get hit, and then they'll try to scroll down, and then they'll go one past it, and then they'll just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and then they end up passing the thing they needed until they die. And I like to not do that. So I like to keep things as few as possible. And I have a maximum of 5 as... Okay. But I have a maximum of 5 as a personal role. So a max of 5 spells and a max of 5 quick items. And that works pretty well for me. And it also... it helps put you in the mindset of versatility above just about anything else. Because if you only have, like, 3 spells, then you want the most versatile spells you can get your hands on. Which is why I have the 3 that I do. Because you have Great Glintstone Shard, which is for the normal, small, basic enemies. Like foot soldiers, normal soldiers, dogs, and whatnot. Then you have Rellana's Full Moon, which is something to use before a fight starts as like a sniper shot that also makes the enemies take more damage from magic. And then you have Ajula's Moonblade, which is the heavy hitting... Oh, I thought he was going to shield. But it's more of a heavy hitting spell for like knights or guys on horseback or the trolls. The bigger enemies that demand a bit more than just the Great Glintstone Shard. And those 3 spells, they can get you through just about anything. Ajula's Moonblade is also really good for multiple enemies. Very good for multiple enemies. I'm telling you, even with just these 3 spells, you can make a magic build overpowered. Nope. And as you can see, I don't even have 80 intelligence. I walked into the DLC with 70. Which... 70 intelligence is still quite high. Like for melee builds, where you use strength or dex, I don't tend to go above 60. I tend to do 54 for strength, because two-handing with 54 strength gets you effectively 80 strength. Sir, please. You're being quite impolite. Yeah, I do 54 strength, and then for dex I tend to do either 54 or 60. Just because from 54 to 60, there's a drop off in damage. And Moonworth Hill. Tends to hit a bit harder. So did they swing with their fist? As you can see there, animation raiders. Well, for some reason the DLC isn't as big on animation raiders, and I don't know why. But here you can head on down. I might use that weapon, by the way. We'll have to see, though. We'll have to see. Because I do like having this for the FP regen. But I might have this and then, like, swap over to the Moonworth Hill Knight Sword. Because it is an intelligence weapon, and it does hit hard. So, could be useful. Because I don't really have, like, my melee options aren't that good. My best melee option is this. Straight. All I really have is the axe and then a Jeweler's Moonblade. Those are my two melee options. And neither of them really hit that hard. Here you're supposed to open this gate. But I am a contrarian, and so I'm not going to open the gate. I refuse. Because what's the point of existing if you aren't going to be difficult? Right? Like, why make life easier on anyone when you could just make an int build, be a snobby, be difficult, glint blade trio, that's where we got the shield. Now, in the beginning of part 1, we had magic glint blade on, and I said that it's very similar to Great Glintstone Shard, but it's not as good at direct fights, but it is better against enemies that use a lot of animation readers, and Glint Blade Trio is just like a better version of that. Now you might think, well, we jumped over that, but it just gets us back here, so you're forced to open the gate, right? I will find a way to be difficult. You can't open it from the side, by the way. But I will find a way to be difficult, no matter what the universe says. When there's a will, there's a way, and I have very much the will to be a pain in the butt. And that's what I'm gonna do. And no one's gonna stop me. Not even a guy with a shield. Rellana might stop me, actually, now that I think about it. Because I don't know for sure, but if I had to guess, you can go down there. I would say that Rellana probably resists magic. I don't know why I would think that the magic person would resist magic. What a silly concept. It's not like Raya Lucaria did that or anything. I like how he hit him. He took damage, and then after he took damage, he went back up to full health. But it still didn't save him. 'Twas not enough. 'Twas not enough. But here, Grace, right up there, boss fight. Instead of doing either of those things, we're gonna jump over here. Because there's stuff over here. Not much, in fact. Very, very little. But there is one thing. And it is up this ladder. So earlier in Castle Ensis, we got a weapon, and I didn't make much of a fuss about it. But it was this weapon right here, which is part of a new weapon class of light greatswords. And right here, we get Ash of War wing stance, which can be put on light greatswords. But I talked about it with the great katana with overhead stance. This is a new weapon class, and the Ash of War of overhead stance is useful on, or it can only be put on great katanas. But the great katana is the only great katana that is infusible, and therefore overhead stance is only useful for a single weapon. Do you get where I'm going with this? Just like the great katanas, Milady is the only infusible light greatsword, and therefore Ash of War wing stance is only useful for that one singular weapon. And I find that a bit strange, but if that's what the game wanted to do, then I suppose that's what the game wanted to do. And who am I to judge the game for such decisions? But despite that weird decision making, both of those weapons are still very good. And so, yeah. Here, we can summon Needle Knight Letta. She's the person we talked to at the very beginning of part 1. She's the only one you see in the base game. And she tells you to touch the withered arm. And that's what we're gonna do. Or that's what we did do, rather. And we're just gonna back up. And we're gonna fight magic with magic. I'm curious to see how this is gonna go. Because I've never fought Rellana with a magic build before. But yeah, Renella's Full Moon, on top of being good as a sniper before a fight starts, it's also good when you're doing co-op, Yeah, I knew that was coming. But it's also good as a sniper if you can sit back during co-op. Like, if the boss is on you, focusing you, very bad. But if the boss is focusing someone else, like Mimic here, or Needle Knight Letta, or some human that you summoned, or some human that summoned you, Rellana's Full Moon, great option. Until the boss comes at you. But that's why we have it on Mimic here as well. Uh-oh. I feel like that third swing should have hit me. I'm gonna be upfront on that. I think that third shot should have hit me. And the fact that it didn't, I'm grateful, but Remembrance of the Twin Moon Night and 180k. So we were doing less damage than I had hoped. We were doing basically as much damage as I was expecting. But that went a lot better than I expected. So, happy about that.
Hello again. Did you meet?
I did not want to talk to you. I want to look at this. I abandoned here my heart. And Scudery fragment. As I've said, those CT crosses have Scudery fragments, so good to get those. And yeah, this is Scudetto Altus, which we're not going to do just yet. Instead, we can go do the catacomb that's over here, because in the last run, like, I went through this catacomb in the initial run, and I saw most of it. I was happy with it. But then in a later run that I didn't record, I found quite a few things I didn't find before. And in the second recorded run, I said, I'm gonna show all that off, but not this run. I'm gonna do it in the intelligence run. And this is the intelligence run, so off we go. This place is so atmospheric. It looks so good. I'm running past all the enemies because we are 39 minutes in. And I like to keep things at or under an hour. Meaning we have 21 minutes to get here and go through it. And I don't want to rush going through the catacomb itself. So I'd rather rush getting here. And I didn't think 21 minutes was enough to do Bellerotte. These enemies, they just keep jumping like that. Not forever, but for a decent bit. And they can be pretty annoying if you're doing a melee build. I mean, a shield stops them. Like a shield and then a guard counter. Pretty good at stopping them in their tracks, but Yeah, spike trap, and the blood tells you generally where that's gonna be. And these enemies... Oh, we two-shot them. Now, we didn't really get a good look at them. But... in case you don't know, those enemies are actually reskinned from Dark Souls 3. I'm not dealing with them. I'm not dealing with them. Magic builds are just too good. Here, red lightning pot. But yeah, go and take a good look at that enemy, and then look at the candle enemies in the Duke's Archives, or Grand Archives, I think it's called in Dark Souls 3. So look at the candle enemies in these catacombs, and then go look at the candle enemies in the Grand Archives. They're basically the same enemy. Now, personally, I don't have an issue with reskins or reusing assets. Especially since they don't do it that much, and they don't do it for stuff that's too important, and they do it very well. But you can look at them here. And the fact that they have magic that they can cast, like sorceries, and then the fact that they have a dagger and the robe that looks like it has wax or stuff on it. I mean, the headpiece is different, but the rest of it, they're very, very similar. Very, very similar to the candle enemies in the Grand Archives in Dark Souls 3. And as I said, I don't have a problem with the assets being reused, but I wish that you could get their weapon and armor set. And I have more of a problem with not being able to get their armor set than with but yeah, more of a problem with not being able to get their weapon or armor set than anything to do with assets being reused, because this is a Black Knight. In case you don't know, Black Knights are a staple of the entire series. That's a gold item. We will get back to that in a minute. For now, yeah, Black Knights are a staple of the series. Like, they're in Dark Souls 1, they're in Dark Souls 3. I don't know if they're in Dark Souls 2, but they're in Elden Ring. So, yeah, they're in multiple games, and I don't have a problem with that at all. My biggest problem with the Black Knights is that their weapons, which we can show off here, do holy damage, even though they're part of Mesmer's army, which is known for fire. And so the fact that they do holy damage instead of fire, despite being part of the fire guy's army, I have far more of a problem with that than assets being reused. But yeah, Black Knight Commander Andreas is something I missed in the initial run. Although I have heard that he's not as good as Black Knight Captain Hugh. Which I can understand that because Andreas has a shield and computer enemies in this game that have a shield really like to hold the shield and not do much else. So I can see that being a bit of an issue. I forgot that I had this on. And... oh wow. They didn't just let us shoot them. A lot of enemies that hide behind corners like that will just let you shoot them. So I'm kind of surprised that they didn't. Oh, lizard greatsword, nice. But yeah, I mean, very quickly we can look at this. So, if you use the heavy attack, you shoot a little projectile. And I think that's pretty neat. Because it just gives you more range. But anyways, if we were doing a melee build, we would have to run in here, kill this guy, and this guy would drop down behind us. And both of those enemies are slow and don't have a lot of health. So, wouldn't be a big issue there, but there are a lot of instances where the game feels very different depending on if you have a ranged build or a melee build. You can drop down there, but there's nothing good down there. Sadly. See, there, we'd be forced to back up. But because we have a magic build, yeah, we have to back up, but we can kill them while they can't do anything. And here, if we were running a melee build, we couldn't do anything against that guy. And if we try to come down here, then we'd have to deal with 2 enemies at once. But because we're running a magic build, we basically dealt with 0 enemies and then 0 enemies. Well, I didn't realize there was a gap there. But this here is another thing we missed. Ashvor Blink Bolt. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Ashvor Blink Bolt, but some people are. And more options, always nice. And then here, you get the Stone Sheathed Sword. There's 3 of these locations, and the first one, no matter which one you find first, will give you the Stone Sheathed Sword. The second one will turn it into the Sword of Light, and the third one will turn it into the Sword of Darkness. And Sword of Light and Darkness both do physical and holy damage. And as I have said before, I think that there's a bit too much holy damage. Especially since it's the worst damage type. It's not completely awful, garbage, useless. Never use it the way some people act like it is. But out of physical magic, fire, lightning, and holy, holy is the worst. Again, not by too much, but it is the worst. And so I would like some more variety. I'd especially like more lightning weapons. But Stone Sheath Sword is pure physical, but if you change it to either sort of light or dark, then it gains holy on top of that, and I'm not a big fan of that. I also just like how this looks, although darkness looks very cool as well. Light looks alright, but not as good in my opinion. But yeah, the first one gets you the Stone Sheath Sword. The second one you find turns into light. The third one you find turns into darkness. And then you can bounce it back between light and dark. I don't know if you can turn it back into the Stone Sheath Sword. But that's something that we can test and find out on this character. So, we can do that. But first... Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Sir, that was so rude of you. Drop Rellana's full moon, so he takes extra magic damage. And then... That's a grab attack that does a decent bit of damage. And it gives them a lot of health back. But the reason why I went, is because Mimic Tear used a spinning weapon 4 times in a row. There they did it 2 times in a row, and then they tried to smack. And then they did it a 3rd time. Like, Mimic Tear... People say Mimic Tear is the best Spear Dash, and I highly disagree. I mean, obviously I think that they're good because I use them. But oh boy, Mimic Tear is not smart. Yeah, I'm gonna die here. Now that was a decent bit on me because I wasn't really trying. Because I was more just flabbergasted by Mimic Tear, but yeah, that's more than anything, that's my problem with the Carrion Regal Scepter, is it has spinning weapon as the skill, and you can't infuse it to put no skill on it. And Mimic Tear loves to spam spinning weapon. I mean, they could drop a giant magical frost greatsword or the moon, and they choose to do a little spinny spin. And if that doesn't describe Mimic Tear perfectly, I don't know what does. And so, Mimic Tear is good, but I don't see them as the best. pretty much entirely because they're just not smart. Like, they do the stupid. I mean, even... We're running an int build, and Mimikir still isn't smart. And it's kind of sad. Oh. Ooh. I really didn't think we were gonna stun them out of that. I thought we were gonna take the hit. But, nice. And as you can see, I have the melee weapon in the left hand and this in the right hand, and I do that so that way when I get on Torrent, I can still use spells. And also because the right hand being your main weapon is so natural for me that whenever I try to put the staff in the left hand, it always throws me off. But that is one problem with this setup of melee weapon in the left hand is if you want to do a critical hit, then you have to do this. But you could have axe of sacrificial axe, that's what it's called. You could have sacrificial axe in the left hand and your staff in the right hand, but then also have Sword of Milos in the right hand, so that way you can swap between them. So that way you can just swap to get the critical hit, or swap if you want a more hard-hitting melee weapon. You know, options. But I think we can end it here. We continued on with the rest of... What is this region called, actually? I just think of it as the Shadowland, but I think of the Shadowland, or Realm of Shadow, but I think of that as the entire place. Kind of like how this is Limgrave. The region is Limgrave, but all of it is the lands between. That's how I see this. Like, this is the region, but the entire place is the Realm of Shadow. So, what's this region? I don't know. But we finished off the open world section of the region. We got a few caves. Access to a few caves. We went through Castle Ensis, got access to Altus, and we did Fog Rift Catacombs. For items, we got the spread crossbow, the Talisman of the Dread, Horned Bairn, two-headed turtle talisman, the ability to buy mushrooms and red flesh mushrooms, Milady. We got Moonwraith Knight Sword, Wolfcrest Shield, Rellana's cameo, Glint Blade Trio, which we can look at next time. We got Ash of War Wing Stance, we got Remembrance of the Twin Moon Knight. We got the ability to craft red lightning pots, we got Black Knight Commander Andreas. We got a Great Ghost Glowwort. We got a random drop Lizard Great Shield. We got Ash War Blink Bolt, Stone Sheath Sword, Death Knight Twin Axes, and the Crimson Amber Medallion +3. So, good progress today. I'm happy with that, and yeah.